Starting us off at number 10 are the ancient Egyptians, arguably my favorite ancient civilization, maybe tied with the Greeks and the Romans. I mean, they had the femme fatale Cleopatra as their leader, so hello girl power. Their pyramids were a feat in and of themselves. They worshipped cats, like I would fit right in there. Now, the ancient Egyptian civilization existed between 3150 BC and 30 BC and is one of the oldest civilizations on this list. They functioned as a series of stable kingdoms before Upper and Lower Egypt became unified. Achievement-wise, I think we look to Egypt for a lot of art, culture, and other societal advancements. Their irrigation systems were before their time, they practiced effective medicine, they even made the earliest known peace treaty, but the one achievement the world is still truly amazed by are their construction techniques. The pyramids and the Sphinx are freaking incredible. I've never seen them in real life, but I really want to. But it's widely believed that the pyramids were made by moving huge stones to the location and lifting them into place. But skeptics believe it was aliens that built the pyramids, because how on earth can an ancient civilization accomplish an architectural feat like that? Yeah, aliens could have come and built them, or the ancient Egyptians could have been aliens themselves. Coming in at number 9 are the ancient Greeks, and boy did I love learning about them too. We had this Roman Greek day in my primary school, so my mum made me a cute toga and stuff for me to wear, and not gonna lie, I was the most fashionable person in year 5 that day. No cap. It's the truth. Now, the ancient Greek civilization existed from 2700 BC to 479 BC and was the epicenter of many things we still do today, most notably the Olympics and the concept of democracy. The Parthenon, their sculptures, they laid the foundations for modern physics, geometry, and biology. They had people like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Archimedes, thinkers and philosophers we still quote a lot today. Now, how is it possible that this civilization had so many great minds and ideas? Isn't the common belief that the older the civilization, the more almost backward and clueless they were? That's not true from any angle with the Greeks, which makes me think about aliens. We've always believed their intelligence is way more advanced than ours, and so what if the ancient Greek civilization was speckles with some aliens that gave them the ideas that humans needed in order to progress forward? Did they help us? Dramatic gasp. At number 8 we have the Indus Valley Civilization. This famous civilization existed between 3300 BC and 1900 BC and was located in current day northeast Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwest India. This one is one of the oldest on the list. It's like in the top 3 along with Egypt and Mesopotamia. At the time it was the biggest civilization since it spread over 1.25 million kilometers, and since the people were settled around the Indus River basin, they had a good source of food and water. I can't say this one is ancient because unlike the others on this list that ended, this one is still going. It was mostly farming settlements in 4000 BC, but by 2600 BC there were a ton of cities built everywhere. In fact, it often had the best scientific achievements out of all the civilizations, and they were arguably the most prosperous out of all of them. They were known for their extensive urban planning, drainage systems, non-residential buildings, handicrafts, and more. Like, these mans have commercial buildings out here, like why? Shouldn't you be trying to figure out how to create fire? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Prehistoric rock paintings found in Tirama show humans wearing what look like modern spacesuits and drawings of UFOs. Now, why would they be there unless the civilization had seen these things or come into contact with them already? Perhaps they came from them. Filling on number 7 slot is the Incan civilization, and me and producer Chris really don't know if it's Incan or Incan, so yeah. We had that back and forth. Guys, I'm just gonna switch it up throughout the paragraph. Whatever comes to me instinctually is just gonna come to me, you know what I mean? Also known as current day Peru, Ecuador, and Chile. The Incan civilization spanned between 1438 AD and 1533 AD, and its empire was the largest South American empire because it truly flourished in every way. It was well established, they transformed the capital from a village to a city shaped like a puma. They were an expansionist civilization that assimilated other cultures into theirs quite seamlessly, and that's something we have trouble doing even now. The Incans' military, trade, and fishing were highly advanced, but again, the most impressive feature about them was their architecture, making things like Machu Picchu and the city of Cusco. Machu Picchu is a citadel located on top of a 7,940-foot mountain range and was initially built as a royal estate for an emperor. They made the whole thing on fractured rocks and somehow used local materials to bind them together and fit, which is pretty impressive. Their road system was also very well made, so it begs the question, did they have extraterrestrial help? Are they extraterrestrials themselves? We don't know. Now at number 6 is the Aztec civilization. Now it's only fitting we talk about the Aztecs right after the Incans, since they were emerging around the same time the Incans were really establishing themselves. The Aztec civilization was located where current day Mexico is during 1345 AD to 1521 AD. Ironically, at the end of the 1200s, the civilization was actually made up of 3 rivaling cities. We have Texcoco, Tlacopan, and Tenochtitlan. Guys, slow clap for me for pronouncing those. Good for me. Now 125 years later, the people of these cities banded together and created a new state which arose to prominence as the Mayans fell. Tenochtitlan was a military hub of the Aztec civilization and was the place which decided what the next conquest would be. Their reach even spread to places like Guatemala and Chiapas. The Spanish came in the 1500s, bringing about the decline of the Aztecs, but that wasn't before they made their mark. They built incredible temples, their art was unmatched, and their construction techniques were also on point. But nothing super alien-y. Now let's jump forward to 1947 and the Roswell UFO incident. What if the ancient Aztecs were aliens and left Earth after the Spanish conquered them? Maybe they finally decided to return hundreds of years later, but the attempt backfired. Why Roswell of all places? Coming in at number 5 is the Persian civilization. Honestly, anytime I hear the word Persia, my mind immediately goes to the Prince of Persia game because I played it so much when I was younger. Anyway, the Persian civilization existed between 550 BC and 331 BC, and it was located where modern day Iran is, which I feel like is a bit of a no-brainer. Now, once upon a time, this civilization was actually the most powerful one in the world and took over 2 million square miles of land. At their peak, they controlled Egypt and all of Central Asia. They expanded so freaking quickly in the space of 200 years, which is really nothing, but it's not their empire and military might that impresses me, it's their architecture and art. I absolutely love all Persian architecture. They're so intricate, colorful, and you can just feel how culturally rich they are. A lot of complex instruments, music, and dances originated from there, and I mean their rugs are basically in every person's household. My house back home has 18 Persian rugs, like what even is that? What even is that? Iran, it seems to be a place where UFOs have tended to lean towards. In 1976, there was a radar and visual sighting of a UFO over Tehran, but anytime aircraft tried to get near it, there would be electromagnetic interference. Then, a few years later, thousands of people saw what looked like a UFO in the sky. Then the same thing happened again in 2003, and there's so many more instances. Why are all these UFOs just attracted to Iran? Do they have ties? And number 4 is the civilization of Atlantis, parentheses, question mark, parentheses. Not the luxury hotel resort and water park, the underwater lost kingdom. Now Plato first mentioned Atlantis in 360 BC, and it was meant to be an insanely powerful kingdom with technology more advanced than ours and an unmatchable navy. Fast forward around 9600 BC, a terrible disaster hits and the island sank into the sea, never to be seen again. Many teams have tried to find Atlantis over the years, notably a man called Jacobovici, who dove into the Marianas Trench. All he found was 6 Bronze Age stone anchors near Spain, which seemed to have come from a civilization existing 4,000 years ago, which was way off. But many people believe because their technology was so advanced, they found a way to disappear to us but still exist by themselves. Perhaps they cracked the code to living completely underwater and invisible as humans, and that's what they've been doing since 9600 BC, who knows? Plato never clarified how advanced was. Many people also believe an underwater tomb belonging to one of Atlantis' early leaders is the entrance to the hidden kingdom. But all this seems far beyond the capability of any civilization, no matter how advanced they are. Doesn't seem too far-fetched for an alien civilization though, and maybe the entrance to the underwater tomb can only be opened by one of them. Maybe they fled Atlantis and hid it because they were going to return to it one day. Filling our number 3 slot is the Maya civilization. Now I thought it was Mayan as well, but apparently in modern day society we call it Maya. Maybe wrongly famous for making everyone think the world was gonna end in 2012, this civilization existed between 2600 BC and 900 AD, and it was located in parts of current-day Mexico and Central/South America. They peaked at around 2600 BC and had a population of 19 million people, which was insane. By 700 BC, they had created their own writing system, which they then used to make solar calendars. In terms of art, any Maya art is exclusively to do with their elite population. The society specialized in craft, soft, which is why their architecture is as amazing as it is. It was estimated back then that it would take 67 days for men to build a commoner's hut, but around 10,686 days to build an elite person's residence. But the urban city of Tikal would have taken millions of man days, which begs the question of how did they do it? I'm guessing they had help. There are also tombs located under some of their structures which haven't been opened yet, which has me thinking that whoever locked them will come back for their contents one day. Now at number 2 is the Mesopotamian civilization. Known as the first civilization in the world, it existed from 3500 BC to 500 BC and it was located in present-day Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. Sumerian was the earliest language and they were surprisingly modern when it came to gender roles. Both men and women had to learn how to read and write, which I mean slow clap to you, we went really backwards after that before we finally got back to that path. Art existed way before Mesopotamia, but that's because it was part of human culture, not civilization. They refined it and formalized it and made art a thing. They excelled at maths too, using a sexagesimal numeral system, aka with a base of 60. That's why an hour has 60 minutes, a day has 24 hours, and a circle is 360 degrees. Facts. Mesopotamians even figured out how to control flooding, store water, make glass and lamps, make weapons, and they created the initial laws of the world and the Code of Hammurabi. As the first of their type, I think that's pretty noteworthy. On the other hand, they also believed the Earth was a flat disc, but I feel like we can just sweep that under the rug. You know, they achieved a lot more. We can just you know. Believers think that aliens were on the Earth before humans, and if that's the case, what if the first civilization was all them, helping us get a head start in this difficult world that we call life? Maybe they're not as bad as we think. And finally, at number 1 are the ancient Romans. Honestly, such a brutal era, but also one of my top 3 favorites for sure. Dubbed as the most powerful ancient civilization, the Roman civilization existed between 550 BC and 465 AD, and isn't known for one thing, but many. It went from being an elective monarchy to a democratic republic to a military dictatorship. Like, the Romans have really been through it all. They controlled 5 million square kilometers of land, which had 20% of the world's population in it at the time. The ancient Romans inspired modern republics like France, and the aqueduct and road systems were state of the art for the time. The Romans had some of the greatest emperors in history: Julius Caesar, Augustus, Octavian, and more. Now, as great as they were equally brutal as well. And since their history is so vast and goes so far back, they've had their fair share of alien-related sightings. In 218 BC, philosopher Titus Livius saw a number of gleaming ships in the sky, and it was 218 BC, you guys. You bet your airplanes or satellites weren't even an idea at that time. In 76 BC, Pliny the Elder saw a spark from a falling star. It grew as it ascended till it looked like it was the size of the moon before ascending back up into the sky and to the heavens. That's 2 instances out of the many that I found. So why were aliens trying to communicate with the Romans so bad? Were there people among them?
Starting off this countdown, we have Easter Island. Easter Island is a volcanic island located in Polynesia. It's probably best known for its huge statues that are found all over the island. These statues are called moai, and there are said to be more than 900 on the island. In fact, the inhabitants on this island were considered incredibly sophisticated. I mean, those statues are made from solidified volcanic ash, and they're said to take up to a year to make for just one. So how did they manage to build hundreds of them? We don't know. Now, research suggests that their methods of living weren't sustainable, so it's estimated that they settled on the island between 700 to 1200 AD. At its peak, the island held 12,000 people, but eventually they used up all of the island's resources and had to move on. That led to the loss of the island inhabitants and their society. Coming in at number 9, we have Çatalhöyük. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This is considered one of the first urban settlements in the world. And of course, before I go any further, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel because it really helps us out and I appreciate it. So this civilization was created 9,000 years ago. It's located in modern-day south-central Turkey. Back then, there were 8,000 people that lived together in one big town. What's interesting is that the civilization had no streets or roads. In order to travel around town, they actually traveled along people's roofs. Let me explain. So the houses were built right up against each other, and they had holes in the roofs and a ladder. So to enter the home, you would go into the hole and then climb down. To get around, you would walk along the roofs. Pretty fascinating if you ask me. In 5000 BC, this civilization was abandoned. We don't know why, but they think that climate change is a factor. It was discovered in 1958 by a man named James Mellart when excavating the area. Him and his team dug up the area for 4 years. In our 8th spot, we have the lost city of the Turquoise Mountain. The Minaret Gem is a 213 feet tall tower built around 1190. This structure is considered part of the lost city of the Turquoise Mountain. Around the minaret, they found pottery kiln, a Jewish cemetery, and other items suggesting a civilization was once present there. In fact, it's believed that people of different religions, including Christians, Muslims, and Jewish individuals, lived together there harmoniously for hundreds of years. Coming in at number 7, we have the Maya civilization. I got flashbacks to grade 10 history class while writing about this one. The earliest Maya settlements date back to around 800 BC. During the pre-classic period. The Maya had built thousands of cities around Central America. They built elaborate palaces and temples and other structures. They also excelled in art and mathematics and astronomy. Their peak as a society was around 250 AD to 900 AD, or the classic period. However, after that, their cities were abandoned. The big mystery is why? Well, there are a number of theories, from climate change to internal conflict to invasion or disease. But we still haven't got one solid answer. Now what's crazy is how big the Mayans' influence was on society. Moving on to number 6, we have Cahokia, aka America's Forgotten City. It was located in what is now Illinois, and back then it was considered North America's largest city. Its peak was during 1050 to 1200 CE. At that peak, they had a population of 10 to 20,000 people, and their city spanned over 6 square miles. It was first discovered in 1961. Archaeologists in the area unearthed some ceramic figurines. As they continued to dig, more and more was unearthed. Eventually, they discovered a small copper workshop. Inside, there was a fireplace with coals for the copper. It was also discovered that the city was deserted in 1350. For unknown reasons. Some possible theories are disease, flooding, deforestation, or overhunting. But again, like most of these civilizations on the list, we truly don't know. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the lost city of Petra. This city is located in the desert canyons and mountains of Jordan. It's believed that people started living there back in 9000 BC. Soon, it became a thriving city and trading center. It was filled with giant monuments and structures and tombs, all carved into the side of the cliffs. Nowadays, it's considered one of the new 7 wonders of the world. But it was determined that around the 7th and 8th centuries, the people of Petra began to abandon their city. It's thought that the changing of trade routes may have had something to do with this, whereas others believe they were forced to leave by a series of floods and earthquakes. The city lay untouched until the early 1800s. That's when an explorer dressed up like a local and snuck his way into the city, which was tightly guarded. Now it's a huge tourist destination. And in fact, some scenes from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade were filmed there. So that's a little fun fact. Moving on to number 4, we have Terra Preta. For years, Terra Preta, a civilization in the Amazon, was said to just be a myth. Back in the day, Spanish explorers wrote home talking about cities made from gold and civilizations in the Amazon. Of course, no one believed them. In 1541, an explorer went out on the search for El Dorado, the lost city of gold. Instead, he came across a civilization in the Amazon. He said that there were large villages and farms and cities. But years later, explorers went to the same spot he claimed this all was, and they found nothing. But now, satellite imagery has revealed that the jungle did once have large structures and an agricultural system. It's presumed that the civilization got wiped out by disease brought in by explorers. Or maybe they left because they found it way too challenging to live in the Amazon. Coming in at number 3, we have Indus Valley. Thousands of years ago, the Indus Valley used to be home to 5 million people. It was a huge civilization that stretched over 900 miles along the Indus River. It extended from modern-day northeast Afghanistan to Pakistan and northwest India. The civilization consisted of 2 large cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. It had more than 100 towns and villages, but around 1800 BCE it began to decline for unknown reasons. It was rediscovered in 1856 when British officials were working on building a railway to connect cities. As they were working, they discovered fire-baked bricks. There were hundreds of thousands of these bricks. In 1920, their first major excavation took place, and that's when they discovered the Indus Valley civilization. It's thought that maybe changes in the rainfall patterns made it hard for them to grow food, so they had to relocate. But we still don't know for sure. In our second spot, we have Roanoke. It all started back in August of 1587. A group of 115 English settlers arrived on Roanoke Island. It was located off the coast, which is now considered Dare County, North Carolina. After a few months of living there, a man named John White, the governor of the colony, sailed back to England to gather more supplies. He left his wife and kids behind. But when he arrived in England, there was a huge naval war between England and Spain. His ship was seized by Queen Elizabeth. She took all available ships for this war. But this meant that John couldn't sail back to the island and to his family. 3 years later, he finally returned back. But the island was completely abandoned. There was no signs that anyone had ever been there. They just disappeared without a trace. The only clue lay carved into a tree. The tree had the name Croatoan carved into it, which was the name of an island that a tribe lived on. As a result, some believe that the inhabitants were killed or abducted by this tribe. But that's just a theory. Another theory is that they tried to sail back home to England and died along the way. And in our number one spot, we have Thonis Heracleion. This one is pretty much a real version of the lost city of Atlantis. So in the early 2000s, a group of divers found something fascinating off of the Egyptian coast. It was a face staring right back at them. Well, not a real face. That would have given them nightmares. No, it was part of a statue. They continued searching and found more statues, ruins of temples, jewelry, coins, oil lamps, shrines, and a tomb. This is the lost civilization of Thonis Heracleion. Based on the artifacts, it was determined that the civilization was founded around 2,700 years ago. It was flooded or sank around 1,500 years ago. Apparently, the city was built around a big temple and was filled with a network of canals. But now it all lays underwater. How did this occur? Well, it's thought that they experienced a very disastrous flood, causing their buildings to collapse and soil to liquefy.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Olmec civilization. The Olmec civilization has often been referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, and from somewhere between 1400 to 400 BC, the civilization rose in the Mexican Gulf Coast. The name Olmec came because they lived in the Olmen, the land of rubber. The Olmec civilization was thriving and advanced, and they too had their own mysterious stone structures known as the Olmec colossal heads. They even were able to successfully build aqueducts, which is an amazing feat for the time period. The civilization, however, started to see its decline around 400 BC. During this time, two of their major cities were just abandoned, which is very mysterious and of course super strange. They left behind everything, their buildings and structures, artifacts and statues. They just seemingly picked up and left. There isn't much left to go on, to be totally honest, but experts believe that some sort of natural disaster might have been a cause for the disappearance. Something like a drought or an eruption could have wreaked havoc on their food supply. There is also the possibility of conflict between them and other civilizations in the area. At the end of the day, exactly what happened here remains quite a mystery, with only the remains of the civilization left to look at for clues. In our number 9 spot today, we have the ancestral Puebloans. This group, who were a culture of indigenous Americans, built their lives in what is now referred to as the Four Corners region of the United States. This area now consists of southeastern Utah, northeastern Arizona, northwestern New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado. This group was able to create beautiful stone homes into the side of cliffs during the 12th and 13th centuries. When I tell you that the level of skill and work this took was incredible, it really was. Some of these places would have hundreds of rooms, and they were the tallest buildings in the United States until the creation of skyscrapers in the late 1800s. That is absolutely wild. Unfortunately, these works of arts wouldn't be lived in for long, long, as the civilization met a rapid and violent decline. Many experts will point to religious and political conflict as a contributing factor to the decline of this civilization, but no one is totally clear. What we do know is that there have been discoveries in the area that point to violence, human consumption, water management problems exacerbated by a drought, just a lot of bad stuff that clearly shows the ending was an incredibly tough time for the people going through it. In the end, this all led to many of these people having to abandon their homes and flee south. While this settlement collapsed, it doesn't mean that the culture or the people were entirely gone. Many modern-day descendants of this civilization include the Hopi and the Zuni peoples. In our number 8 spot today, we have Cahokia. This settlement was established somewhere around 1,200 years ago, and it was a river valley community located near what is now St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. This is actually quite an incredible settlement because it was the largest north of Mexico at the time, with a population of around 20,000 people. The city had things like buildings, plazas, and one of the things that they were most known for was these massive mounds. The largest was known as the Monk's Mound, and it was 100 feet tall. The location of this settlement proved to be amazing for a while. Its spot near several rivers made it the perfect trading location. This was all great and ideal until it really wasn't. Experts believe that somewhere around 1200 AD, the population was wiped out by a massive flood that hit the area. Some wondered if the flood only contributed to an already dwindling civilization because they believed that perhaps resources in the area were quickly disappearing, or maybe they had been hit by disease. Others believed that the flood was the first massive event, but that perhaps it was followed by a little ice age that only sealed the fate. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Maya. The Maya are often referred to as one of the most advanced civilizations in our history. They carved huge stone cities in the jungles of South Mexico and Central America, and they weren't just plain and simple places. They were filled with plazas, palaces, pyramids, and temples. They created one of the most famous calendars. They had math and astronomy. This is all to say that this was one of the most thriving civilizations, and they reached their peak around 250 to 900 AD. Here's the thing though, nobody is entirely sure what happened after this. It is believed that it was most likely a combination of famine and drought, as well as the change the environment saw due to the deforestation that happened for farming. This all would have caused there to be a lot more civil unrest, and it's likely that neighboring cities would have turned on each other. We do know, however, that it took around 200 years for the civilization to disappear, so it wasn't just one single event, and it was quite a process, which is such a testament to how strong the Maya people were. While talking about this, it is very important for me to note that I'm talking about the downfall of the Maya civilization and not the downfall of the Maya as people. There are many people still alive with Maya ancestry who live all over our world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Indus. The Indus became one of the world's earliest civilizations as they began to build their settlements some 8,000 years ago. They live in what is now India and Pakistan, and they expanded over great distances, 386,000 square miles, which is far more than other, more well-known civilizations of a similar time period. In fact, this group is thriving so much that they accounted for around an estimated 10% of the world's population at the time. The civilization was completely thriving until around 1900 BC, when things took a serious turn for the worst. They began to abandon cities and started to move southeast, and no one is entirely sure why. There was a leading theory that perhaps other groups of people from the north brought about their collapse, but that theory has since been put aside. At this point in time, more recent research is pointing towards a hiatus in the monsoon season that could have played a role in the downfall. When the monsoon season disappeared for essentially 2 centuries, this of course would make it nearly impossible for them to continue farming for food in the way that they had. Experts believe some other factors also played a role, such as natural disasters like earthquakes, or even the outbreak of some diseases like malaria or cholera. In our number 5 spot today, we have Easter Island. Oh, Easter Island. Many of us have heard of Easter Island before, whether it's because of the world famous stone statues or because of its incredible remoteness, but whatever the reason, let's take it back to the beginning. Sometime between 300 and 1200 AD, the Rapa Nui people found and settled the island. This is quite the feat already, considering the closest continental point to Easter Island is a point in central Chile that is 3,512 kilometers away. It's so remote, so the fact that they even found it is amazing, interesting, and then what they managed to complete is even more fascinating. Without advanced tools or even wheels, they managed to create the most famous Moai statues, the largest of which stood 32 feet tall and weighed 82 tons. Of course, this means that these early people on the island were brilliant, hardworking, and super advanced, but something happened, and by the 1800s, the statues had toppled, the population of the island took a drastic downturn, and the leaders of the island were being overthrown. Experts have been able to get a pretty good idea of what happened in this instance, though. Firstly, they took a look at charcoal fragments as well as pollen in the sediment, and they were able to determine that those living on the island had cut down almost all of the trees, and the rats on the island were eating the seeds of the trees before they had the ability to regerminate. This led to disaster completely. According to an article on History.com written by Jesse Greenspan, quote, "This ecological catastrophe, which eliminated the ability to make rope or seagoing canoes and reduced the populace to burning grass for fuel, may have then ushered in a period of mass starvation and civil war. The arrival of Europeans only added to the decimation, starting in 1722, when the first Europeans to set foot on Easter immediately shot to death several islanders. By the 1870s, several waves of smallpox, along with a major Peruvian slave raid, had reduced the number of natives to roughly 100. Now, Easter Island is a special territory, and it once again has a thriving population. As of 2017, the Chilean census registered that 7,750 people were living on this island, 45% of which considered themselves Rapa Nui. In our number 4 spot today, we have Göbekli Tepe. This is a pre-pottery Neolithic archaeological site that is located in Turkey. This site has been dated all the way back to somewhere from 9,500 to 8,000 BC, making it the world's oldest known megaliths, which truly is just incredible. This site is comprised of a bunch of large circular structures that are being supported by massive stone pillars, many of which are decorated with abstract, anthropomorphic details and things which have provided very rare and very valuable insight into prehistoric religion and the iconography of the times when it was built. One of the most amazing things about this area is that it was first used at the beginning of the Neolithic period, which marks the oldest human settlements anywhere in the world. It has been called the world's first temple, and it was used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from a wide area. Here's what makes this so remarkably interesting though. Despite what I said earlier, this place is not a settlement and instead was used by many people. The site was essentially built by Stone Age humans who came from about a 200-kilometer radius around the site. It isn't quite clear why they stopped using it, but what is clear is that without a doubt, this was one of the best archaeological finds our modern society has ever had, as it gives us just a glimpse into what life was like in prehistoric times, and it totally changes what we once thought about the timeline of our history. In our number 3 spot today, we have Catalhoyuk. Moving on over from Göbekli Tepe, we have this settlement that sits not too far away at all. Located in what is now Turkey, this settlement was thriving around 8,000 years ago and was known specifically for its engineering and architecture. One really cool thing about how this city was set up was, rather than traditional roads, the people who lived there got around by using the rooftops. I'd feel like I was in Assassin's Creed. That sounds so cool, but I guess for them it was just the most logical setup, especially considering all of the buildings were connected to one another. The people who lived here had a tradition of burying their past loved ones under the floors in their homes, as they did not have any sort of open burial space. In the end, it isn't quite clear exactly what happened to the residents of this ancient city, although there are of course theories. Because of the fact that this city didn't expand as widely as other civilizations seen in the area, many believe that perhaps disease came, spread, and rapidly declined the population. Archaeological work continues on the site, however, even today, to give us every insight possible into the lives of these ancient people. In our number 2 spot today, we have Thonis. I've spoken about Thonis before because this place was super important to legend. Greek legend says that this was the city where Hercules took his first steps into Africa, as well as the place where Paris hid Helen before the Trojan War began, and for years, people thought it was just that. A place in the legends. That was until the early 2000s when it had its modern rediscovery. As it turns out, just over 2,000 years ago, either an earthquake, a tsunami, or a combination of the two hit the city and submerged it underwater. After 5 years of searching, archaeologist Frank Gaudio located the ruins of the city underwater as they had been submerged in the ocean. Since then, excavations and explorations of the ancient city have taken place, and it was stocked full of some incredibly cool treasures from thousands thousands of years ago. In 2010, a type of ancient Nile riverboat was found here, and even just in August of 2021, it was announced that wicker baskets that contained fruits of the duum palm tree, as well as grape seeds that date back to the early 4th century BC, had been found among the ruins. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Skara Brae. This is an area that is located in Scotland, and it was found in an exceptionally surprising way. In 1850, there was a huge storm that hit Scotland, and it was so bad that around 200 people passed away from it. The next day, however, once the storm had passed, residents of the Orkney Isles began to notice that part of a cliff had dislodged, but it uncovered a sort of hidden settlement. Tests were able to date this site back from 3200 BC to 2200 BC, and it was shown to have been inhabited for about 600 years. There were round stone homes here, and the roofs were made out of whalebone and peat, and the design of this little city suggested that there wasn't a hierarchy, but rather a group of people living peacefully as farmers, herdsmen, and traders. While the site is small, the houses are in quite great shape for the amount of time it's been. This little settlement is Europe's most complete Neolithic village, and while it is older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, it's been called the Scottish Pompeii because of how well preserved it is. No one is exactly sure why the residents of this village abandoned it, but it is likely that a change in climate is somewhat, if not fully, responsible, and a storm might have been the reason those living here had to leave in haste, which is deduced by how all of their belongings were left behind.
Number 10. Shangri-La. First described in writing by English author James Hilton, Shangri-La is a utopia nestled in a valley in the western end of the Kunlun Mountains, which has become synonymous with an earthly paradise. It is said that the people who lived there were almost immortal, living hundreds of years longer than normal people and aging very slowly. Hilton was the first to call it by this name, but ancient Tibetan scriptures mention 7 such places, which were created to be sacred places of refuge for Buddhists in times of strife. The name seems to come from Shang, a district in southern Tibet, Ri, the Tibetan word for mountain, and La, meaning pass. Therefore, Shang Mountain Pass is believed to be the place where the mythological city exists, but that hasn't stopped other places from claiming the title. In 2001, a county on the northwestern part of the Yunnan province in China renamed themselves Shangri-La County, though many dispute their claim, since it seems that Hilton actually traveled to a place called the Hunza Valley, located close to the China-Pakistan border, which is an isolated green valley surrounded by mountains enclosed on the western end of the Himalayas, so it fits the description pretty well. But the people there actually seem to age faster due to increased ultraviolet radiation on the higher altitude areas, so the jury's still out on that one. Before we get to number 9, folks, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out so that we can keep bringing you the most amazing videos. Number 9, California. Now, I know what you're thinking. Connor, if California isn't real, then where does Mickey live? Well, I'm not talking about that California. I'm talking about the place the state was named after. In a Spanish novel published in 1510, a place akin to the Garden of Eden or Atlantis was described by the author as a mysterious island, quote, to the right hand of the Indies, entirely populated by women and had no metal other than gold on it. It was ruled by Queen Khalifa, which is where the island got its name, California. When Spanish explorer Hernan Cortez came to North America, he thought that he'd found the mythological place off of the mainland of America, because there appeared to be an island, when really it was only the bottom peninsula of the state, across the Sea of Cortez, which was named after himself. But Cortez was obsessed with the story, and since this island was technically to the right of the Indies and had so much gold on it, you can see how the name came to mind, and thus California was found. Well, they explored north and realized that it was not in fact an island. That didn't stop Cortez and others from drawing it as one on maps for hundreds and hundreds of years. YouTuber Johnny Harris actually has a fantastic video all about that if you want to hear more. But for now, the location of the storybook version of California still remains a mystery. Number 8, Thule. Stepping into Norse mythology, which has some of my favorite stories, Thule is a cold and peaceful place where they had months with no sunlight, said to be located between Scandinavia and Iceland. The ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was the first to write about Thule during his travels around 330 BC. He was also one of the first to describe the effects of the moon on the tides and to estimate the length of the British coastline, and was a specialist in longitude and latitude. Some scholars believe that Thule is just another name for what is now called Norway, while others think that it is truly a lost island off the coast of Iceland. The Germanic tribes in Thule allegedly showed Pytheas around their homeland and explained that in the winter, the sun did not rise at all, but in the summer, there was no night. Number 7. Camelot. Known as the court and castle where King Arthur reigned, Camelot first appeared in 12th century texts and eventually became synonymous with Arthur and the world that surrounded his stories. Some people believe that the place is entirely fictional, but many more still have attributed it to other places in Great Britain where castles still remain standing. Debate has been going on since the 15th century about the location of the beautiful capital of Arthur's kingdom, and we may never know the true location where Merlin and the Knights of the Round Table called their home. Number 6. Lyonesse. Sticking in Arthurian legend, Lyonesse was the home of the hero Tristan, and was said to have been lost to the sea. The story of Tristan and Iseult sees the two traveling across the kingdom from Ireland to Cornwall to deliver Iseult to Tristan's uncle for marriage, but the two unknowingly drink a love potion and fall for each other, having to endure many battles to save their love. The kingdom was supposedly located on the Isles of Scilly, and the 140 islands that exist there now are apparently just the hilltops of the now sunken kingdom off the coast of Cornwall. There is evidence to suggest that water levels were remarkably lower at the time, and that in the last 3,000 years there have been enough submergence that this lost kingdom could still exist in the water below. If they ever made a movie about Tristan, I wonder if they'd get Liam Neeson to play the Lyonessian. Number 5. Aztlan. The Aztecs were one of the most powerful civilizations to emerge from the ancient Americas, and so much about them has been lost to time and to conquerors wiping out their history. While much is known about their later days as a civilization, we know very little about their origins. Allegedly, the mysterious island of Aztlan is where the Aztec people came together to create their society before migrating to the Valley of Mexico. According to legend, there were 7 tribes who lived in 7 caves near the island, and in order to maintain peace between their peoples, they came together and moved to Aztlan, which means the land to the north, the land from whence we, the Aztecs, came. Since it was so long ago, the island could have been in an area that is no longer submerged in water, and searches for it have taken place from the bottom of Mexico all the way up to Utah, but it's yet to be found. Some think it's pure myth, while others hold out hope that it will be discovered. Number 4. Julfar. Home to the legendary Sinbad the Sailor, Julfar is one of the most famous cities of Arabia that has been lost to the desert. Located near the now super modern Dubai, Julfar was the hub for the entirety of the southern Arabic trade in the Middle Ages, because unlike other lost desert cities, Julfar was a bustling port town. Now here's the cool part, this city has actually been found. In the 1960s, archaeologists discovered signs of settlement and civilization dating all the way back to the 6th century, and have since found countless residences, shops, and items which have helped us unearth the mysteries of this lost city. This find was very important because it helps historians fill out the timeline of the area, showing how neighboring towns received goods and made trades, as there were few port towns described or found before. Number 3. El Dorado. The very idea of a city made entirely of gold is enough to fascinate people. Add in the fact that the place has been lost and is awaiting a brave explorer to discover it, now you've got a legend. The origins of the tale come from the Muisca tribe in Colombia, and El Dorado doesn't actually refer to a city, but to the king at the center of the city or the society. The Muisca tribe had an affinity for golden treasures and often used them in rituals for their gods, and one of their most important rituals was conducted when they got a new king. The king would be stripped naked, covered in gold dust, and set on a raft adorned with gold and jewels to the middle of Lake Guatavita. The townspeople would then throw golden coins and trinkets into the lake to appease the gods, and the king would wash the dust off of himself in the lake, after which he was known as the Gilded One, or El Dorado. In 1545, conquistadors attempted to drain the lake to find the lost treasures and found gold along the edges of the lake, proving their theory. They used bucket chains to drain as much as they could, but they couldn't reach the center. And in 1580, a businessman tried to drain it again, and while lowering the water level and finding treasure along the edges, he too couldn't reach the center. And in 1965, the country of Colombia named Lake Guatavita a protected area, making it illegal to do any more searching. It is estimated that at the center of the lake lies what could amount to billions of dollars in ancient gold relics, but we will never know for sure. Number 2. Kalahari. In 1885, a Canadian entertainer and adventurer named Guillermo Farini, also known as the Great Farini, became one of the first Westerners to cross the unexplored and treacherous Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. When he returned to Canada, he wrote a paper and showed photographs of ruins he discovered which proved the existence of a civilization which had been lost to the desert sands. In his paper, he wrote, "We camped near the foot of it, beside a broken line of stone which looked like the Chinese wall after an earthquake, and which, on examination, proved to be the ruins of quite an extensive structure, in some places buried beneath the sand, but in others fully exposed to view. He continued on to say, "We traced the remains for nearly a mile, mostly a heap of huge stones, but all flat-sided, and here and there the cement perfectly plainly visible between the layers. Many expeditions have been conducted to find the lost city, including 12 by the grandparents of none other than Elon Musk, who wants to steer away from ancient civilizations and start a new one on Mars." A 2016 documentary series used aerial photography and radar in conjunction with Farini's descriptions and found some man-made ruins near an oasis in the Kalahari. More exploration is needed, but it's very possible that we have found this lost city. And finally, we reach our number one, which is of course Atlantis. Arguably the most famous lost city, Atlantis has captured the imagination of people from around the world since it was first mentioned in writing by the Greek philosopher Plato in 360 BC. It is said that the island was a place of extremely advanced technology and an unmatched navy, but it was lost in one terrible night of fire and earthquakes and sank into the sea. Since then, there has always been someone looking for the lost city to prove it's real, and one of the most promising expeditions was made by Canadian-Israeli journalist and investigative archaeologist Simcha Yakubovich, who has made many documentaries and discoveries about ancient civilizations. He partnered with film director James Cameron and used Plato's text and new emerging technology to find some incredible evidence on the sea floor. 6 Bronze Age stone anchors off of the coast of Spain in the Strait of Gibraltar, one of the areas believed to be the resting place of Atlantis. One of the other main theories is that the Atlanteans were actually the Minoan civilization on the island of Santorini, Greece. Around 3,600 years ago, the Thera eruption occurred and the island shattered, and it, as well as the Minoans on it, were lost to the sea. With the location and the way the island was lost being so similar to Plato's descriptions, this seems like a great candidate for the lost city of Atlantis.
Starting off this countdown, we have Port Royal, Jamaica. Port Royal was once known as the wickedest city on Earth. It was home to real-life Pirates of the Caribbean. It had a population of over 7,000 people. That was until 1692. On June 7th of that year, a massive earthquake caused a deadly tsunami to strike the land. 2,000 people sunk along with the entire city. People thought that this was done by God to try and get rid of the pirates, but honestly, those that survived just moved further up the coast. This city was forgotten about until the 1950s, when underwater excavations caused the city to become rediscovered. Today, this city is considered one of the best preserved underwater cities in the world. In our ninth spot today, we have Lion City. The Lion City, or Shaicheng, is a 1,300-year-old city located in Eastern Europe that now lies completely underwater. But it wasn't always like that. In the late 1950s, the city was purposely flooded to build a hydroelectric power station in the area. What's pretty fascinating is that although it lays about 40 meters underwater, the buildings are still in pretty good shape. The only change is instead of having human residents, it's now home to tons of aquatic life. Now, it laid untouched until 2001 when it was rediscovered. Now, you may be wondering, why was it given the name Lion City? And that's because there are a number of carved lions featured in the city, but they also have carved dragons and phoenixes there as well. Sadly, only experienced divers are permitted to explore the city. That's because of the depth and temperature and low visibility down there. But alas, you can still see how cool it is by Googling images of it. And honestly, it's quite beautiful. In our 8th spot today, we have the Mulifanua site. Very little information is known about this next city. Located in Samoa, this city was discovered in the 1970s. Basically, a bunch of pottery shards were found and researchers were like, dude, there's probably more down there. And then they were right. In the end, they found thousands of pieces of pottery. But not only that, they found the remnants of a village. The village dates back to around 800 BC. In fact, it's considered one of the largest villages in the area. Like I said though, not much is known about this village, making it quite the mystery. In our 7th spot, we have Huanaco, Bolivia. Back in the day, residents in the area were told great stories of a long-lost underwater city, much like Atlantis. They said the city contained heaps of Spanish gold. And looks like part of the story was actually true. Recently, divers in the area found ruins of an ancient temple complex. This temple is said to be more than 1,500 years old. More than 200 dives have taken place to get a better understanding of this ancient city. Who knows though, maybe there is gold and other priceless artifacts buried around there somewhere. Coming in at number 6, we have Pavlopetri, Greece. Back in 1967, an oceanographer discovered a number of ancient ruins underwater in southwestern Greece. What he didn't realize is that later this would lead to him finding an ancient underground town. In fact, this is considered the oldest underwater city. It dates all the way back to the Bronze Age. It was believed to have been above water from the 3rd millennium until 1100 BC. What's crazy is that there's almost an entire complete city underwater. You got streets, buildings, churches, gardens, tombs, you name it. It really is breathtaking. Nowadays, they created a 3D image of what this city might have once looked like. And it's pretty freaking cool if you ask me. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Japan's Atlantis, aka the sunken city of Yonaguni. Just off the coast of Yonaguni lies a city completely sunken underwater. There are complete pyramids, ruins of a castle, structures etched with faces, and rock sculptures that look like animals, all underwater. Every structure has such intricate design and detail. Like there's a monument made up of a series of rock formations, including carved steps, stone pillars, and a triangular formation. Now, what's weird is that we don't know the origins of this mysterious city. It's theorized that a terrible earthquake caused the city to be engulfed by the water, but we don't know for sure. To this day, this city has left experts baffled. It's one of Japan's greatest unsolved mysteries. Moving on to number 4, we have Villa Apician. Located in Argentina, this was a thriving city in the 1970s. It was home to about 500 residents, and they had about 300 businesses there. That was until the late 1980s when it sank completely underwater. During that time, they were receiving far more rain than usual. Soon, the lake around them began to swell. It ended up breaking the dam and sinking the entire city. In 1993, the town was about 33 feet underwater. That was until 2009, when some of the water receded and part of the town became visible again. Old rusted cars and debris were then exposed out of water. But of course, most of the town will continue to remain underwater, and the parts exposed will probably be flooded over again. Moving on at number 3, we have Atlit Yam. Located off the coast of Atlit, Israel, this city is said to be between 8,300 to 8,900 years old. It was first discovered in 1984 by a marine archaeologist, Ehud Galili. Since then, a number of expeditions have taken place in order to unearth this city. The city is about 10 meters below sea level and covers an area of 40,000 square meters. What's fascinating about this place is that right in the middle, it has this massive 10-acre stone circle thing. We don't know what's up with that, but many believe it might have been used for some kind of ritual. Over the years, a number of houses, graves, and wells have been discovered in this city. Scientists believe that the city was struck by a tsunami which caused a volcanic eruption, causing the city to flood and then sink. In our second spot, we have Dwarka, India. Back in the day, there was a legend that was passed down about a city laying 131 feet below the ocean. This was a legend until the 2000s when it came to life. The story of this magical city everyone had been told was indeed real. Since then, a number of ancient artifacts have been unearthed in the city, including pottery and sculptures. Also, they found a number of human bones. After running carbon dating tests on it, it revealed that the city could be almost 10,000 years old. It truly is incredible. Again, we don't know how the city came to be or what happened to it. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Heracleion, Egypt. Located just northwest of Alexandria is the sunken city of Heracleion, and is referred to as Egypt's Atlantis. It lay lost under the sea until the early 2000s. A group of divers were working off the Egyptian coast when they found a large fragment of rock under the seabed, or so they thought. It was just a rock. When they brought it out of the water, they found it to be a sculpture of the Egyptian god of fertility. After this discovery, they madly went to work exploring the area. They ended up discovering pieces of pottery, ancient coins, jewelry, busts, and ruins of a temple. Just tons and tons of priceless artifacts. How the city ended up underwater is still a mystery. One theory, though, is that it had to do with the rising sea levels and crumbling foundations of the city, causing it to slide into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, I'm not trying to pick favorites, but out of all the places on today's list, this is the one that I'd love to visit.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have Atlantis. Whether or not Atlantis is real, we just don't know. It's a legendary city that is mentioned in a number of pieces of Greek literature, including by the late great philosopher Plato. It is said that Atlantis was a thriving city filled with affluence and positivity. That was until it sank. Atlantis was said to have sunk into the sea in a single day and night. There has been a lot of speculation as to where the city may be. Many think it may be in the Strait of Gibraltar between Africa and Spain. If Atlantis was real, it would be over 11,000 years old. Did the people sink and drown? We don't know. Coming in at number 9, we have the Mayans. The Mayans were an ancient civilization developed by the Maya people. The population lived in southeast Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, parts of Honduras, and El Salvador. Mayan structures still remain, including Mexico's famous Chichen Itza. The Mayan era began somewhere around 2000 BCE and lasted until around the 8th or 9th century AD. There were 19 million people in the civilization, which was a significant proportion of the world population at the time. Now, we don't know the real reason for the extinction. The most sensible theories include drought caused by overlogging, but there are wilder theories out there. Some think that overfarming meant eventually people starved. Others say that Mayan rulers killed each other in wars, and others think disease was the main culprit. However, there are some pretty juicy articles out there that suggest the Mayans had contact with aliens, and somehow extraterrestrials were their undoing. Sure. A lot of people also think that the answer lies in the blue hole of Belize, an underwater cave yet to be fully explored. I love me an underwater cave. Coming in at number 8, we have the lost people of Easter Island. The Rapa Nui of Easter Island were the ancient islanders who built the stone figures you have likely seen in pictures. How they managed to build these busts using their limited resources, we just don't know. But how they died out is even more mysterious and makes up talking points in Jared Diamond's best-selling book, Collapse. Easter Island is a small patch of land, roughly 63 square miles in size, and it once had a thriving population. When Captain James Cook found them in the 1700s though, they were on the cusp of extinction. The main theory is that they destroyed the island's ecosystem by cutting down too many trees. Another theory is rats. Rats may have infested the island and destroyed crops. Others say disease wiped them out. Coming in at number 7, we have the Aztecs. In 1545, the Aztec Empire of Central America began to fall when 90% of its population died of mysterious diseases. It seems that up to 17 million people died in the Aztec Empire, which was a massively significant proportion of the Earth's population back then. In Aztec records, they simply referred to the downturn in fortune as Cocolitzi or pestilence. From accounts at the time, people got a fever, blotchy skin, they started vomiting and bleeding out of their eyes and nose. Horrendous. What this mystery illness was had a lot of historians scratching their heads, but in 2018, a new study concluded that it actually may have been a widespreading of salmonella. Salmonella, of course, is severe food poisoning, and if it's untreated, it can lead to death. It is possible that Spanish invaders introduced salmonella to ancient-day Mexico when they brought in livestock from Europe. Coming in at number 6, we have the Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization was a Bronze Age civilization in the northwest regions of West Asia. It seems they lived between 3300 BCE and 1300 BCE, and they were one of the 4 civilizations of the Old World. Now, sadly, it seems that the civilization died out abruptly, very abruptly, which has raised a few historic eyebrows. There are a number of theories in circulation, and they include land drying and desert encroaching on farmland. Others think flooding destroyed the land and brought about disease in its wake, but then on the flip side, some people think that changing river patterns led to drought. Others think they died in wars. They were thought to be a very peaceful civilization, not equipped for fighting. Others say that some survived and simply dissipated. We just don't know. Coming Coming into number 5, we have the lost souls of the North Sea. In 2018, evidence of a lost human civilization was discovered under the North and Baltic Seas. It seems that the settlement discovered by archaeologists is being dubbed the Swedish Atlantis, and it could define a whole era of human development that we just don't know about. Right now, a team of geologists, archaeologists, and anthropologists on board a ship are excavating a sandbank on the North Sea floor measuring about 30 kilometers. What may have happened to the people who lived there, we simply don't know. Another massive mystery at number 4, we have the lost colony of Roanoke. What happened to the Roanoke is a complete and utter mystery. In 1585, a small group of settlers made Roanoke Island off the coast of North Carolina their home, although many left when they found the conditions to be unsatisfactory. In 1587, 2 years later, 115 English settlers came to join those who were left, but weirdly, they found that no one was there. They didn't seem too disturbed by it though, they thought they just, went away. At the time, the colony decided to send their governor, John White, back to England to gather fresh supplies and fresh settlers to expand the colony. Now, when he returned back to the colony where his wife and daughter were, I may add, 3 years later, he found no trace of the inhabitants. Now, this is the second time that this had happened. The only clue he found was the word Croatan written on a wooden post. Croatan? How strange. Where did the settlers of the Roanoke go? They were never ever seen again. Now, some theorists say that they were killed by a Native American tribe, although the fact that there was no trace of their bodies is very suspicious. There was no trace of a fray either. Others say they decided to sail back to England for some reason or another and they got lost at sea, although why would they not leave a message letting their returned governor know? I just don't know. It's very deeply unsettling that this happened twice. Were they simply abducted? Did they just vanish into thin air? Was it a time portal? Coming in at number 3, we have Under the Ice. Some theorists believe that there is an ancient civilization trapped under the thick ice of Antarctica, and it may well be the case. Antarctica didn't always used to be frozen. Now, the deep freeze started happening around 23 million years ago. 160 million years ago, it separated from Africa, and back then it was by and large a pretty hospitable place to live. We know that the first humans as we know them came from Africa, but what if before that they were living in the area of land that used to be connected to Africa and then became Antarctica, but we'll never know about them because they're buried under ice. It's a theory for sure. Now, some people think that they have spotted man-made structures under melting ice in Antarctica, which may be the evidence that theorists have been looking for. Coming in at number 2, we have the Martians. It has long been suspected that there was once life on Mars. While all of the scientific evidence we currently have seems to refute that, some people are convinced that the now very, very cold planet was once able to house life. They think that the Viking spacecrafts and the former Mars rovers Spirit and Opportunity even captured it on film. In 1976, Viking took one of the infamous pictures of Mars, the face on Mars photograph. In 2007, Spirit photographed a so-called Martian rock statue, adding to the list of so-called other statue sightings on the red planet. One of the last images pinged back from the now sadly shut down Opportunity rover appeared to show a bottle buried in the rocks. A lot of people think that Mars was once just like Earth, but suffered some kind of cosmic catastrophe. Many people believe that when the Mars 2030 astronaut mission takes place, we will find clues that will help us understand our own place in the universe. Finally, coming in at number 1, one of my favorites, we have the lizard people and the Silurian hypothesis. A mind bender here for sure. The Silurian hypothesis asks the question, what if humans weren't the first civilization on Earth? Now, researchers from the University of Rochester alongside NASA have produced a paper that details how we might be able to tell if humans were the first civilization to arise. Basically, some people think that humans might not have been the first rulers of Earth. Now, if you're thinking the name Silurian sounds familiar, it is taken from Doctor Who. It's a mythical reptilian race who were on Earth before humans, but they went into hibernation only to pop up again millions of years later. This also sounds a lot like Scientology, and you know what? Maybe Tom Cruise was right. Now, NASA strongly doubts that there was an industrial civilization before ours, because we would be able to note it in geological records. However, the Earth's crust is pretty thick, so perhaps all of the rocks and glaciers that we've studied are only telling part of his story. Perhaps even deeper down, there are scary mysteries waiting to be unraveled.
The lost city of Aztlan brings us to number 10. Many people believe that the missing island of Aztlan is where the Aztec people began to form as a civilization prior to migrating to Mexico. There were a lot of tribes and hunters and hunter-gatherers and Aztec people ruled a large empire in central and southern Mexico in the 15th and early 16th century. Since then, we have gathered a ton of information about how they used to live and what they accomplished, but little is known about their origin story. Aztlan is believed to be a mystical land, but a ton of others believe that this location exists and one day we will physically find it. There have been countless searches for this island, but we haven't been able to find it yet. If the lost city of Aztlan is found, we would uncover an insane amount of history and culture. Well, you know what, I hope this day comes sooner than later. Number 9 takes us over to Lion City in China. This place is often referred to as China's Atlantis City, and that's because this lost city is sitting at the bottom of a lake. This was once a thriving city that was known all over China. It can only be visited if you plummet 100 feet below sea level. And no, this city wasn't lost due to natural causes. This ancient city disappeared due to hands of humans. Although it sits deep underwater, it's still miraculously fully preserved. All of its structures, statues, memorials, and archways are still perfectly intact. It was rediscovered about 2 decades ago, and since then divers have been repeatedly making trips below to the surface to marvel at this beautiful lost city. Dwarka brings us to number 8. According to the local folklore in India, this was the hometown of Lord Krishna, and this place was believed to be an old wives' tale until the ruins of the city were discovered 131 feet below the ocean. These amazing ruins were found beneath the surface of modern day Dwarka, and the beauty of this city has baffled everyone, including experts. Marine archaeologists have found sandstone walls, a grid of streets, and remains of a seaport. They believe that the city was built 9,000 years ago. It's just amazing that we were able to discover the city that seems like it only existed in folklore. I wonder what else is out there just waiting to be discovered. The medieval city of Jolfur is in at number 7. It's believed that Jolfur exists somewhere in the United Arab Emirates, and Jolfur used to be a thriving city for thousands of years. It acted as a port and commercial center before it fell into ruins and disappeared from history for almost 2 centuries. Part of the city was actually discovered by archaeologists in the 1960s, but historians are still baffled by the fact that most of Jolfur still remains hidden under the sand dunes. Maybe one day we'll be able to excavate the entire city and explore Jolfur even deeper. The lost city of the Z climbs onto this list at number 6. This highly mysterious city is believed to be somewhere in the jungles of Brazil. Apparently it is composed of a complex civilization, but because it is so isolated, it has never been properly documented or reported on. In 1925, an explorer named Percy Fawcett headed towards the jungles of Brazil to find this lost city called Z. But once his expedition started, his team vanished without a trace while searching for it. Despite countless rescue missions, Fawcett and his team were never found, and this location still remains a mystery to this day. I'm guessing with the wildfires in the Amazon, this city could have been destroyed, but hopefully one day the legendary city of Z will be found.
This is where they sang. It's astonishing.
It's just a pity you couldn't see it intact.
Number 5 brings us to Angkor. Located deep within the Cambodian jungle, there is a huge medieval city that was hidden from us for centuries. But thanks to new archaeological tools and techniques, we are now able to explore this once lost city. It took over a century of grueling hard work to fill in the map, but now the lost city of Angkor is slowly beginning to reappear, but there are still a ton of blanks that need to be filled in. From what we have studied, Angkor has a ton of secrets, including an elaborate network of temples, boulevards, and it has a bunch of sophisticated waterways that spread across the city. I'm so curious to know what this city was like centuries ago. I find this stuff so interesting because, well, we can really evaluate how we've evolved and how architecture has changed throughout time. I mean, I went to school for architect, and so I'm just so fascinated with buildings. Diving down into number 4, we have the city of Atlantis. It was first mentioned by the the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, more than 2,300 years ago. Atlantis is one of the oldest and greatest mysteries in the world today. According to Plato, this kingdom existed 9,000 years before his time, and one day it mysteriously just disappeared. Even after spending years of researching Atlantis, the truth about this strange city remains a mystery, and that is why we are so fascinated with finding its location. So where could it be? It's believed that the city sunk into the sea after an earthquake or a tsunami somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, but others believe that Atlantis is just a myth. As of today, there is no scientific evidence that proves, whether or not this mysterious city exists, but maybe Atlantis is somewhere at the bottom of the sea just waiting to be rediscovered. Let me know what you guys think. I think Atlantis is real. The lost land of Lyonesse comes onto this list next up at number 3. There's a strong belief that this lost city is nothing more than a legend or myth, but there's still a small chance that it could be a reality. It is said that this city disappeared when it completely sunk into the ocean on November 11, 1099. If this mysterious city does exist, it would be quite large. Apparently, it contained 140 villages and churches, but thanks to a massive flood, the entire village was swallowed and engulfed in water. It is said that all the people and animals living on the land drowned, and once it was completely immersed in water, the land never re-emerged. There is evidence that shows that the sea levels back then would be considerably lower, so it is very possible that the city could have been occupied by humans. But since this city appears to be a legend, well, this location remains a mystery. A sacred city comes in at number 2. Dvarka was recently rediscovered in the 1980s by scientists. The city is said to be a Hindu, Jainist, and a Buddhist sacred city that forms one of the 7 sacred cities of Hinduism. According to the ancient legend, this city was destroyed during a huge battle between Krishna and King Salva. The city was apparently destroyed by blasts of energy, and it was never seen again. That is until it was rediscovered by scientists, and they determined that the city was actually located where the legend described it to be. That is absolutely insane. Well, apparently this city could have been built around 9,000 years ago. I mean, how do people even know information like that? And if that's the case, this would make it one of the oldest cities on Earth. El Dorado is in at number 1. El Dorado is known as the lost city of gold. Now this is a city I want to find. It is believed to be located in the region of the Orinoco and the Amazon rivers. For hundreds of years, historians and treasure hunters have been constantly looking for the lost city of gold. And who could really blame them? Apparently it is filled with gold and other priceless jewels and treasures. I'm imagining that it looks like the Cave of Wonders, in Aladdin. But sadly, the city of gold remains a mystery, and there's no physical evidence that this place actually exists. And I'm sure if someone found it, they're not going to tell people about it, and it probably took all the gold. They're selling it on the black market, maybe a few coins on eBay or Amazon. Can you sell money on Amazon? I don't know. I'm gonna search.